This is the Hope Not Note podcast,
where we answer your questions and share inspirational stories to fill your soul with hope.
Our mission is to empower hope to those who have been plagued by note.
I'm Dr. Dylan Caswell.
And I'm Brandy.
And we're here to bring you out of the note and into hope.
Welcome to the Hope Not Note podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today's question is from a listener named Kayla, and she asks, I'm going through rehab after ACL reconstruction. Since my injury, I feel like I've lost my spark and I'm often discouraged. Do you have any tips to keep my spirit up during this rehab before I return back to my sport?
Oh, what a question.
It's such a good question.
That is like one of our jams.
Yeah, and also I just feel like it's so relatable. Like if you get injured, there's almost always some discouragement that you feel.
Yeah, because you have the injury and it starts to challenge who you are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of people don't talk about this until it happens, but I just remember working with just various levels of athletes, but most notably youth athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And like their friend group is the people on their team.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like you're spending all your time with these people, and then you have an injury and you're not spending as much time with them because the time that you were spending with them, you're in physical therapy, getting rehab done, or need to do other things because of this injury that you're facing. And it becomes difficult because you start to kind of question like who am I? And there's a benefit to that because it's like, well, you start to realize like, hey, maybe I should have more friends, like more of a diverse friend group because that can help me grow. But also, like I'm going through this thing, my identity is being challenged. But we always say that your body's going to change, your mind's going to be challenged to change, but your spirit should never change.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing here is we got to look at this and say, what can we do to make sure that your spirit does not change and that you do not lose your athletic being?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we get into is that discussion of like, well, what are those things that I can do? And I think the biggest one is remain an athlete.
Yeah.
In the sense of like, it sounds simple, but like the reason that you are an athlete is because you enjoy challenges. It's just that the challenge that you're being presented is not the challenge that you were looking for, but it's the challenge that found you, which means there's a lot of worth to leaning into that adversity and taking on this challenge of going through the process to come back stronger than you ever were. Like injuries don't just happen because they happen. They happen because they're meant to teach you something, whether it's improving your coping mechanism, whether it's working on a potential weakness, whatever it may be, but it's meant to bring you back better than you were previously.
Mm-hmm.
So lean into those challenges. The challenge may be you had an injury, you had a knee surgery, and challenge one is can you just contract your quad?
Yeah.
Like that might be your challenge, but take that on with your athletic spirit and be like, oh yeah, like I can do this. Like let's go quad. Like I got you. And so looking at your rehab is like this series of challenges for you to take on and overcome, knowing that each step along the way you're building momentum to get back. I think the other part is looking at how can you stay involved with the team as much as you can. It's no secret that some of our clients are athletes that have ALS. And it's really difficult because sometimes people, when they're going through this and they're in leadership positions, they start to struggle with like, am I doing enough for my team? And we always remind them that your presence, like you showing up to whatever work event is happening or just like to work and them seeing you there taking on this like terrible condition, but you're still showing up, like that right there is what that team needs. Because now all of a sudden, the challenges that they're facing, they get a new perspective. It doesn't seem as bad. So it allows them to push and forget about all the little things and to start focusing on the bigger things. So know as an athlete, going through an injury, facing this adversity, starting to lose your spark because you don't feel like you're part of the team, like look for challenges, look for opportunities to get involved. Because here's the thing, like because you have a shoulder injury doesn't mean that you can't be training your legs.
Hmm.
and you should be training your legs. Just because you have a leg injury doesn't mean you shouldn't be training your upper body. So like I don't understand when an athlete has an injury, they're completely taken out of team lifts.
Hmm.
Like there's so much that you can still be doing with the team. And now all of a sudden, that team that you're starting to feel isolated from is now looking at you as a leader because when is leadership identified? When you face adversity and you keep showing up. So like all of a sudden, wow, this person's crutching around the weight room to do bench pressing, to do rows, to do overhead pressing. Like they're still part of this.
Hmm.
So like that is a major thing of like train these areas that you can be training that are not related to your injury. And in doing that, the other thing that you're going to do is you're going to help your rehab along. Because guess what do tendons, muscles, muscle skeletal tissue need for healing? Growth hormone and IGF-1. When are they released? In deep sleep and when you're working out. So I don't know, when you're doing this little band exercise in PT, I don't think you're getting a huge release of growth hormone. You go do a leg press, use multiple muscle groups, push some weight, you're now getting that release. And that release isn't just to those muscles, that release is systemically.
Hmm.
So, like, don't shade away from still being involved in those team lifts. Like, that's going to allow you to keep that spirit alive because you're with the team, you're integrated with the team, and you're setting an example.
Yeah.
They're not like you show up to the weight room and you're on your crutches and sitting in the chair over there. It's almost like you're waving the white flag.
Hmm.
And like, who's going to want to follow that leader versus the leader that's crutching around the weight room or on the leg press, but in their arm sling? Like, there's a lot of safe ways that you can keep training with the team and keep that spirit alive. Schedule your PT sessions when your team's not lifting early in the morning, middle of the day, like
Hmm.
just like don't skip out on the team activities. And I think that leads to the next point of, keep aside from lifting, train, practice every week as if you're preparing for the game. Like I was guilty of this. I had an injury my sophomore year in high school and was on crutches and would go to practices, like still showed up to practices, but I wasn't involved.
No.
I was on the sideline, just like on my crutches, and I'm like, I'm here.
Yeah.
Like, okay, that's a good step, but man, I look back and I'm like, I could have done so much more. I
Hmm.
could have been over with the receivers, saying, "Hey, that route was a little sloppy. Clean that up. Hey, nice catch, good hands. Let's go.
Hmm.
Hey, coach, is there anything I can help with in film studies? Is there anything I can do in practice to kind of keep a leadership role and to encourage the team?" Gosh, do that.
Hmm.
And now all of a sudden, this team that you're feeling isolated from again is starting to go, wow, like this dude or this girl, they're facing this and they're still involved. Like they want this, and them wanting this makes me want this more.
Hmm.
I think Aaron Rodgers is a good example
I was thinking of
of
that.
this when he
Yeah.
went through that Achilles injury of how much that he realized that his presence of showing up
Hmm.
and limping across the field and being at practice and being in the quarterback room, how much that changed the entire atmosphere
Hmm.
of that organization. They didn't do well, but they did better than what they
Yeah.
would have done if he hadn't been there pushing and saying like, "Hey, I'm coming back sooner than what everybody thinks that I can.
Hmm.
I'm gonna be out of my walking boot, you know, weeks ahead of where other people can because
Yeah.
of the time that I'm putting into this rehab." And he definitely pushed some boundaries in doing that. But it was like you listen to the players on that team saying it was just different when Aaron was in our locker room.
Hmm.
It was different when he's coming to the games with us. So although you may feel like you're not contributing directly on the field, there are so many ways that you can stay involved and it's not going to happen by you just waiting for that opportunity. You have to go and get that. You
Yeah.
have to have the conversation with the coach, with the captains, and you have to show them like, hey, I'm still in this. Like
Hmm.
I'm waking up early to go to rehab. I'm coming, I'm doing the film studies with you. I'm prepping like as if I'm going to be playing. And then in practice, I'm like, I'm on this team. I'm part of this team. I'm in the lifting sessions. I'm like, I'm getting my legs jacked because my arms hurt. Like that goes such a long way in sparking your team and then giving you back that feeling of like that you're part of this.
Yeah.
Because ultimately that's it. It's like you want to be part of the something that gives you the passions that allows you to keep pursuing these goals.
Hmm.
So when you take the injury and you just go, well, my focus is only just like on rehab and not team stuff, you're losing the sparks. You're,
Hmm.
you're you're losing those sparks. So can you do rehab and keep those sparks? 100%.
Hmm.
And you should be. All right. And then the last tip I have is pull up some film of yourself. Like watch yourself competing. Look at like pull up your highlight film. There's so many ways to access it now. When I was younger, you had to like grab the VHS, put the
Yeah.
VHS in, and fast forward to like when you made the play. Or now, like, gosh, there's Huddle, the YouTube account. Like, you can go on and find that it's never been easier to make a highlight tape
Hmm.
for any level of athlete. Go on. What was the best game that you played in? Go watch that and just like commentate for yourself. There's a
Hmm.
guy on the U.S. handball team that did that. He made a highlight video and he commentated over as if he was a commentator doing a top 10. So he had his top 10 plays and he said, "Oh my gosh, look at him jump. Oh gosh, he's got hang time. Look at this. Oh, what a throw." And like was just picking himself up. And I'm like, wow, what a great practice for athletes going through an
Hmm.
injury to do, just to remind yourself that like, hey, you still got it.
Hmm.
And like you're gonna be better when you get back to those things.
Hmm.
So that's what I would say, like our quick dialogue of how do we keep my athletic spirit alive when I'm going through a rehab. And again, like the longer the rehab is, if we're looking at like ACL reconstruction, Achilles repair, the things that are like, hey, you're looking at a 7 month rehab,
Hmm.
9 months before you're back to actually playing. That's where it becomes even more important that you're staying involved because of that length
Hmm.
of it. If you're out for a week, it sucks, but it's not gonna
Yeah.
grind away at you. Where something like a longer rehab can really start
Hmm.
getting to you.
I love the advice you gave, and you used the language at some point in there, like, don't shy away from doing these things. But I almost take it another step, and you kind of mentioned this as well, but like, advocate for yourself. Like, go to the coaches and advocate for yourself because I think of when I had my injury when I was a junior in high school. I thought that I got injured in October. I thought that I would be back by January at the latest and I could finish basketball season. But the coaches didn't really keep me involved. Like I sat and I took stats, which
Mhm.
like I'm very thankful because now I know how to do stats for basketball and for softball, but in well, like literally every sport I can do stats for. But like I was just sitting on the bench doing stats. We didn't have a lifting program, so there was no upper body other than me actually crutching that I was like there was no lifting I was doing. I sat there and I did stats and when you're in high school, for me at least, like I wasn't necessarily hanging out with my friends outside of school. I was hanging out with my friends on the court. Like
Mhm.
that's when I got my social
Yeah.
interaction. And so now I'm sitting on the bench taking stats that like my friends don't even really care about.
Right.
And I'm not having like I remember there were multiple times that I was sitting there and not a single person talked to me for the 2 hours. And then
Mhm.
I went home. And that was like most of the season.
Yeah.
So then when I get to softball, I think like, oh, I'm going to be out of softball soon. At that point, we're starting to realize something worse is going on with my foot because I should be off of crutches. I'm not. That's when like the weird symptoms started happening and my foot was a different color. And I remember going down to North Carolina with my softball team for spring training and looking at my feet and them being two complete different
Yeah.
colors. And it was just crazy and it was confusing. But again, like I was just the stat person. Like sometimes I wouldn't even get to like feed the ball in the pitching machine during practice. Like I was not involved and included like at all from the coach's perspective or the team. I'm surprised I even like was allowed to be there. But then like sorry to go on a rant, but then like my softball coaches, I ended up missing a practice because I like went out of town for a weekend and I got reprimanded for
Mm.
missing a practice when like they weren't involving me at all.
Yeah.
Like literally at all. But I also wasn't advocating for myself because no one really taught me how and I
Right.
didn't have like I believe I'm a leader, but I didn't have that like ability of like, hey, why don't I figure out how to get more involved in this situation? And so I just really think like take this wisdom that we're sharing and really advocate for yourself, like see the different ways that you can get involved that Dylan described because one, like I really believe that what keeps your spark alive as well yes, is all the things Dylan already said, but it's also having that interaction and
Yeah.
having like people and community keep your spark going. And so you getting to like be in it still, I think will help so much.
Yeah.
Like so much. Especially if you're already like it sounds like for Kayla who asked the question, it sounds like she's already going through rehab, which means like she already like this is multiple weeks in, if not months in already. And
Mm.
so like losing the spark and feeling discouraged, now you're kind of climbing out of a hole versus like if you would have had this wisdom ahead of time, like you could have kept going
Yeah.
ahead of time. So also like listeners, put this in your back pocket if you maybe have an injury. We hope you never do, but like put this in your back pocket of like, okay, this is how I can keep going as soon as I get injured, not like
Yeah.
halfway through the rehab process.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I have two more quick points. And what's filtering through my head is do I just deliver the points or do I give the movie references to the
Both,
2 points? All right,
all
both.
of the above.
So I think part of being an athlete and having this athletic being, this spirit of being an athlete, it's like one of the best things is proving people wrong.
Mm.
Like that's the best. Like, oh, you didn't think I could score that many points? Ah, gotcha. You didn't
Got
think that I
him.
could like lift that amount of weight? Huh, gotcha. Like that is one of the best parts of being an athlete is when people sell you short, but you don't sell yourself short.
Hmm.
And like I don't really like this term like proving them wrong, but I haven't thought of a better one at this point. But
Yeah.
you're just showing the potential that you already know that you had that other
Hmm.
people haven't seen. So that
Yeah.
would be the longer way of saying
Or
it.
just simply like when you do things that impress people,
Yeah. Yep.
like get like set out to be your best and like that's going to impress people.
Right. Exactly. And it's pretty normal that, especially at a high school level, that you have an injury and the coaching staff just writes you off.
Hmm.
Like they're unless they're really good coaches, like in the top 1%, they kind of write you off. Like, well,
Hmm.
they're not going to contribute this season. They're not going to put our time and effort into that. Where if you again advocate for yourself and you say, like, hey, I know you're writing me off. I'm going to show you why you cannot write me off.
Hmm.
Like, I'm going to be an asset to this team. And I think of Friday Night Lights, the TV
Hmm.
series, when they switched from West Dillon to East Dillon,
Hmm.
and Coach Taylor and the quarterback state and Jess is phenomenal football brain and is just trying to find her way into coaching and she's a young female in Texas. There's not women coaching in football in the sport at that time, and she continues to advocate for herself
Hmm.
to the point that Coach Taylor goes, "Why would I not give her a reference to become an assistant coach somewhere
Yeah.
because of how much she stayed on it?" And you know where she started? The team manager,
Hmm.
folding towels. Hey, coach, I think that like my job's done. I folded the towels. The jerseys are clean. I just saw this on the practice field. I think we could try this.
Hmm.
Okay, bye. Like, oh gosh. And then I think of Miracle.
Oh, my favorite
And
movie.
oh, there's this one part the last time that we watched it that really stuck out to me that I took a note on it to remember it because I was like, I want to bring this up in a podcast episode.
Is this the
And
moment?
and this is the moment.
Yes.
I've been waiting like over a year for this moment. And I may have already mentioned it before in a previous one, but
This is still the
this is
moment.
still the moment. This is the moment right now. So what struck me in that movie is the scene where they're doing the ice sprints
Hmm.
and more again,
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 again.
again. And what I picked up in that scene, because after you watch it a lot of times, you start picking up different things,
Of course.
is that,
And it's my favorite movie,
and
so
sure,
we watch it often.
yeah, is that the team doctor,
Hmm.
like this person in the hierarchy of society is near the top. Guess what he's doing? He's timing it.
Hmm.
They go to the biggest game. I think we'll call it the biggest game because it wasn't actually the gold medal game
Hmm.
in which they beat the Soviet Union.
Right.
But it was the game that propelled them into the
Yeah.
finals to win. But in that game, he's timing the shifts.
Mm.
Like the society hierarchy of being near the top, doing the most minimal job for the team. There is no role on a team that you are above.
Mhm.
Like every part of it matters. And guess what? If you have an injury and you kind of feel like you're getting towards the bottom of that hierarchy and you want to advocate, you want to get yourself back, sometimes you got to take on the little roles.
Mhm.
But here's the thing. Do those little roles incredibly well and say, "Hey, keep giving me them.
Mhm.
Give me more of these little roles. I'll fold the towels. I'll wash the jerseys. I'll put away the chairs. I'll make sure the water bottles are cold. I'll do whatever the heck you put on my plate to
Mhm.
show you that I am in this."
Mhm.
Because again, it's getting back to that like give me a challenge and I will rise up to it. And I don't care what that challenge is. I got it. And I get it in teams. There's the like, the senior versus the freshman, and the freshmen carry the practice equipment. And like, I get that. I went through that. I understand the hierarchy and you got to earn your stripes and all that. But at some point, why not be that senior leader that goes, hey, I'm going to help out the freshmen carrying some of this stuff? Because as being a part of a team, if the quote unquote littlest person has to do that job, then why can't the most important do that? Most important person do that? And when we look at that in businesses and CEOs, like the best CEOs, they're not necessarily working down at the like assembly lines or in the factory, but they're at least going in there and saying like, hey, I've been here at some point. I get how hard it is. What can we do to make this better? So you're not above any role. And I think as leaders, you have to start accepting that humility. That like there may be things that aren't worth your time and effort, but that doesn't mean that when the time comes that you can't step into those roles to show your team that like, hey, this can be a job for anybody.
Yeah. I feel like we're on the same wavelength because I was going to bring up humility and you just brought up humility. So,
That's
yeah, I mean, the best trait to have as a teammate and as a leader is humility. And so if you're going through an injury, that can feel very isolating and it can feel very focused on you. But with a little bit of humility, that's going to go a long way and help you realize there's a lot that you can do, yes, for yourself in this journey to, you know, keep your spark or to find your spark again and to overcome discouragement. And yes, like that is part of you, but then part of it is also knowing that you have the power to still be part of the team and serve your team and have that humility. And so I think that's great. And also you've never shared that before. You've
let's
never even
go.
told me that. So I love that the timing thing because I never noticed
Yeah.
that and I've seen that movie a lot of times. So
Yeah. It fired me up. It brought me back to when I was working with hockey, and one of my roles was opening the door for line changes. Like not the backup goalie, not the backup like fourth line, but my role, and then my mentor's role, he was on the offensive boards, I was on the defensive boards, was opening the door to allow the team to get in and out, right?
As the PTs.
As having our doctorates, having sports specialties that less than 1% of PTs have, our role for the game and for the team was to one, treat injuries when they happen, keep them happy and healthy, and to open the door.
That's
Hey,
awesome.
that's part of the team. And you know what that did? That brought so much trust with that unit that they were, if they had an injury, they were excited to come to us because they knew that we were part of this. We weren't sitting there, oh, I'm too good to open the door. Ooh, I had my doctorate. I'm not Dr. Door.
Yeah.
So I didn't study how to open a door. And
Well, the reality is there are people who believe that and
yeah,
like don't help. And so you and your mentor, A plus.
yeah, and it was stressful.
Yeah.
Because like
In
joke around
hockey.
about Dr. Door, but gosh, if you've never opened a door to get into an ice rink, it's a little confusing. And then like if you don't understand the line changes and this guy's skating at you as fast as he can and the coach doesn't want the line to change yet, and the coach is saying no, and the guy's saying open the door. You're like in the middle and they're on skates. Like
Yeah.
you got a little bit of time to react, or this dude's going into the boards and coming over, you're getting a skate to the face. So more times than not, I was like, here you coach, open the door.
Yeah. I don't want to get sliced.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that this episode gave you great tips. If you're looking and this is obviously like for listeners and you are hearing this podcast, but if you like to see the written down work, we do have a free resource about finding your spark again and how we can do that and how you can do that if you feel like you've lost your spark, especially in your sport. And so we're going to put that in the show notes and hopefully that can really specifically for Kayla, but anyone listening who feels like they've lost their spark and they're facing discouragement within their sport, this is for you and it'll be in the show notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you
Hope
have
story
a
time?
Yeah, do you have a hope story?
Ah, here's my hope story. I had the flu.
You did.
It was terrible.
Can my hope story be that I did not have the flu while taking care of you?
It definitely could be because I didn't just have the flu, like I had it bad. And that's not the hope story of having the flu because it sucked.
Yeah.
And like to Kayla, like it was only like a week, but in that week, I did not feel like an athlete when I
Hmm.
was laying on the carpet, sweating with body aches, eating a piece of toast
Yeah.
each day. But in that, I learned so much in that week of having the flu.
Mm.
And it just reminded me that, like, again, like taking on the challenge of like, okay, I have this thing. What can I do today? But why did I get this illness? Because it's been like 5 to 6 years since I've had the flu. And it's still like, well, why do I have it? Well, leading up to it, like, we're creating a lot of these new resources that we want to get out to our community and give them this value so that these questions that are asked, there's a game plan for them to start working towards these things. And I was just so fired up, but also doing like extra work and just not pacing and
Hmm.
just grinding it out, but like loving it, but just like a lot of hours, a lot of obstacles that came up with anytime you're working with technology, there's going to be things that happen and was feeling like, hey, I need a break.
Hmm.
But like things were getting delayed and was like, well, I'm not going to be able to take a break. And it was like, whatever, like I'm not going to take some downtime. I'm just going to keep on going, keep on going, keep on going. Boom.
10 days of
Come to
downtime.
the flu. Like you don't think that you know that you needed downtime. You didn't take it. So now here's what's going to happen. You're going to have the flu to have the downtime to honor the thing that you asked
Hmm.
for that downtime. So it
Hmm.
just brought me back to that. Like as an athlete, you know your body better than anyone's ever going to know. You know when it's time to push, you know when it's time to take a rest break. And in that, like your spirit should never change.
Hmm.
And although I didn't feel like an athlete from my body, my spirit during that remained the same. And so just a
Hmm.
quick hope story of the flu.
Of the flu. You suffered well through it. It was definitely hard, but it's nice to be on the other side of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
still clearing my throat and coughing, but like
But
way
not too
better.
bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would argue like it was bad for you, but it didn't linger as well as long as like we both had kind of colds earlier in the year and like it lingered for I feel like 6 weeks where this is
Yeah.
like not really lingering as aggressively as like the cold did,
Yeah.
which is
And
nice.
shout out to the Cheesecake Factory because I lost 6 pounds, but I think I gained it all back from one meal.
From one meal. Oh, that's accurate.
Yeah.
My hope story is simple, but we've been going in the winter, we've been going to a local gym just to like our garage gym is pretty cold and it's hard to heat. So I think we've mentioned before we've been going to a local gym and I've just enjoyed like chatting with the strangers that end up becoming kind of like friends. Like the other day, there was a girl that was wearing a Chiefs shirt like the day of the Super Bowl and we like chatted with her and we hadn't seen her since and I saw her and I like waved and she was really excited and smiled and it was just like very nice to, although I wouldn't necessarily say like we're all best friends and they're coming over and like they're not necessarily part of like this tight-knit community by any means, but like having that acquaintance interaction of joy where you're like-minded, getting after it at the gym. Like we have that with a few people there and I just think it's nice and wanted to bring it up as a reminder for anyone that listens and goes to like gyms, whether it be like a community-based gym kind of style like CrossFit, or if it's just something like Planet Fitness or Crunch or whatever, remember that like the people around you are also people too, and the power of like smiling or saying hi and things like that goes a long way. And in the winter months, especially, I feel like people need that little bit of like smile and joy, and like you have the ability to do that and to give that to someone. And so, yeah, that's my just little encouragement.
Oh, it's a great segue, wrap around, tie the ribbon on this one
Yeah.
because it's again like that takes leadership
Mm-hmm.
to like be in a gym and do the littlest, smallest task of smiling
Mm-hmm.
and just acknowledging a person. First, like, well, I'm too good for that. I got my sets to do, so I'll
Mm-hmm.
be over here lifting like, hey, hey, good set.
Mm-hmm.
Walk away. It doesn't need to be this long conversation, but it's like that's leadership. Are you
Yeah.
willing to do the small things to lift up other people?
Mm-hmm.
And like that goes such a long way.
Yeah. I saw something the other day that was like, I mean, it was a classic, just like reel on Instagram that I think was well intended, but it was like, hey, do you want to hang out? And the person's like, no, sorry, I already have plans. And their plans were like all the different like workouts that they have and like, oh, I'm lifting, I'm getting after it and all this stuff. And I'm like, that's great. And like, don't get me wrong, you can do that and that can be your plan. I don't want it to be that, but I read it as this connotation of like I'm too good to have community. Like I don't need community because all I need to do is like focus on my sets. And like when you get so tunnel visioned in your like working out that you forget that like the person at the checkout is or the check-in, like when you go into the gym and have to like check in, you forget that that's a person. Like it's just not a good look.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like have humility, be a good leader. Remember that like the people around you are people. You don't have to smile at every single person, but
Right.
like it's like a smile goes a long way. And remember that like yeah, maybe your goal is the working out and training, but at the same time like the way you treat people matters more than any lift you'll ever do for your entire life.
Yeah.
And that's just truth. So treat people well and also lift weights.
Yeah. And Coach Ben Bergeron says something along the lines of better humans are better athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Develop the human and then allow the athlete to follow that.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the athletes that he's coached and they're phenomenal humans.
Yeah.
And like it makes them even more likable, more into leadership role, and they're more fulfilled
Mm-hmm.
because they're not like scrumpy athlete, get out of my way kind of athlete. They're focused
Mm-hmm.
and they work hard,
Yeah.
but they're like people that you want to look up to.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for listening. And again, that free resource is in our show notes. So if you would like it, go and click on the resource.
Have a great week, and remember, every day is not just a day to be hopeful, but an opportunity to become hope.
The Hope Not Know podcast is meant for educational, informational, and personal development purposes only and does not constitute any health or medical advice. If you're looking for specific advice, connect with us to work with a Hope coach. The Hope Not Know podcast shall not be liable or responsible for any loss or damage allegedly arising from any information or suggestions in this podcast.